The emergency broadcast crackled through the static-filled radio at exactly 3:47 a.m., jolting Marcus Webb from his restless sleep in the basement of the abandoned fire station. His hand instinctively reached for the baseball bat beside his makeshift cot as the automated voice repeated the same chilling message it had been broadcasting for 72 hours. This is not a test. Remain indoors. Do not approach the infected. Military assistance is en route. Marcus knew better than to believe that last part anymore. He'd been a communications officer for the National Guard before everything fell apart, and he understood what silence from command meant. The scratching sounds outside the reinforced door had intensified since nightfall, a constant reminder that the world above belonged to them now. He checked his supplies by flashlight: 3 cans of food, 2 bottles of water, a first aid kit missing most of its contents, and exactly 9 bullets for a pistol he barely knew how to use. It wasn't enough. It was never going to be enough. But then his radio picked up something different, something that made his heart race with a feeling he'd almost forgotten: hope. A human voice, clear and deliberate, cut through the automated message. This is Elena Rodriguez broadcasting from the Riverside Medical Center. If anyone can hear this, we have a defensible position, supplies, and a plan. We're located on the corner of 5th and Marshall. Come to the northwest entrance. We'll be watching for survivors. You are not alone. Marcus sat up straight, his mind racing. Riverside was 8 blocks away, 8 blocks of streets he knew were crawling with the infected. He'd seen them from the fire station tower yesterday, hundreds of them shuffling through the morning fog, their grotesque silhouettes a nightmare-made flesh. But he'd also seen something else, something that had puzzled him. They'd moved in a pattern, almost like a current, flowing in specific directions at specific times. There was a rhythm to their movement, which meant there might be gaps, windows of opportunity. He'd been trained to spot patterns, to analyze enemy movements, and these things, mindless as they seemed, still followed some kind of instinct. Marcus made his decision in the span of a heartbeat. Staying here meant slow death by starvation or eventual discovery. Elena's message meant possibility, meant other people, meant strategy and coordination. It meant fighting back instead of just surviving. He packed his meager supplies, strapped the bat to his backpack, and tucked the pistol into his belt. The fire station had detailed city maps in the chief's office upstairs, maps that showed not just streets but also underground maintenance tunnels, rooftop access points, and evacuation routes. If he was going to make it to Riverside, he needed to think like a soldier again, not like a victim. As the first gray light of dawn began filtering through the small basement window, Marcus studied the maps he'd retrieved, marking possible routes with a red pen. The scratching outside had diminished slightly. They were less active during daylight hours, another pattern he'd noted. He could use the old subway maintenance tunnel that ran beneath 4th Street, emerge near the courthouse, and use the connected buildings to travel most of the way above ground level. It was risky, but everything was risky now. What mattered was calculated risk versus blind panic. He took a deep breath, whispered a prayer his mother had taught him as a child, and checked his watch. 5:15 a.m. In 45 minutes, the sun would be high enough to give him the visibility he needed. Marcus Webb had been running and hiding for 2 weeks, watching his city devour itself, listening to the screams fade into terrible silence. But Elena Rodriguez's voice had changed something fundamental inside him. Humanity wasn't finished yet. They could adapt, strategize, and fight back. As he positioned himself at the basement door, listening to the shuffling footsteps above, Marcus allowed himself a grim smile. The infected had numbers and relentless hunger. But humans had something better: the ability to learn, to plan, and to hope. The war wasn't over. It was just beginning. Marcus pushed open the basement door with agonizing slowness, every creak of the hinges making his pulse hammer in his ears. The fire station's main floor was exactly as he'd left it the night before. Overturned chairs, scattered papers, and a trail of dried blood leading to the bay doors that he refused to think about. 3 infected stood in the apparatus bay, swaying slightly as if caught in an invisible current, their backs mercifully turned toward him. He'd learned their behavior over these hellish weeks. They responded to sound and movement primarily, with sight being secondary. If he controlled his breathing and moved with deliberate care, he could be practically invisible. Marcus kept low, using the overturned fire truck as cover, and made his way to the rear exit that led to the alley. His planned route began there, 20 yards to the courthouse maintenance entrance, then into the tunnel system. Every step felt like an eternity. Behind him, One of the infected released a low gurgling sound that made his skin crawl, but it didn't turn. When his hand finally gripped the cool metal of the exit door handle, he allowed himself a small exhale of relief. The alley was clear. Marcus ran. His boots pounded against cracked asphalt as he sprinted toward the courthouse, the morning air cold against his face. He could hear the reaction behind him, that horrible collective moan as the infected detected his movement, but he'd expected that. Speed was his ally now. He reached the maintenance entrance, yanked the door open with the crowbar he'd grabbed from the fire station, and plunged into darkness just as the first of them rounded the corner behind him. The tunnels were pitch black and smelled of standing water and decay. Marcus clicked on his flashlight, the beam cutting through the darkness to reveal a narrow concrete passageway stretching ahead. His breathing echoed off the walls as he moved forward, consulting the mental map he'd memorized. 200 feet straight, then a left turn toward the old municipal building. The tunnels had seemed like a perfect solution on paper, but down here in the suffocating darkness, Marcus realized his mistake. If he encountered infected in these narrow passages, there would be nowhere to run, nowhere to maneuver. The baseball bat would be useless in close quarters. His fingers touched the pistol at his belt, and he wondered if 9 bullets would be enough, wondered if he could even shoot straight when panic set in. Then he heard it, footsteps ahead, moving fast, coming closer. Marcus killed his flashlight and pressed himself against the wall, his heart threatening to explode from his chest. But the footsteps weren't the shuffling drag of the infected. These were purposeful human running. A light bounced around the corner and a voice called out, strained and desperate, "Don't shoot. I'm human. Please God, I'm human." A young woman burst into view, her flashlight wild in her shaking hand. She couldn't have been more than 25, with short blonde hair matted with dirt and terror in her wide eyes. Behind her, echoing through the tunnels, came the unmistakable sounds of pursuit. Multiple infected, their moans amplified by the concrete walls into a chorus of nightmares. "Run!" Marcus shouted, clicking his light back on. They ran together, two strangers united by desperation, their flashlights creating chaotic shadows as they raced through the tunnels. The woman was fast, keeping pace with him even though she was clearly exhausted. The municipal building exit. Marcus yelled. 50 yards ahead. They could hear the infected gaining, that terrible sound growing louder. Marcus's lungs burned, his legs screamed, but he pushed harder. The exit ladder appeared in their flashlight beams like salvation itself. "Climb," he commanded, and the woman didn't hesitate. She grabbed the rusted rungs and pulled herself up with frantic strength. Marcus followed, his boots slipping once before finding purchase. Below them, the first infected reached the ladder base, arms reaching upward with grotesque determination. The woman kicked open the street-level grate and hauled herself out. Marcus was right behind her, and together they slammed the heavy metal cover back into place. Through the grate, they could see pale, distorted faces pressing upward, hands grasping uselessly at the barrier. For a moment, both of them simply lay on the pavement, gasping for air, alive. The woman turned to look at Marcus, and despite everything, she managed a breathless laugh. "I'm Ashley Morrison," she said. "And I really hope you know where we're going." Marcus smiled grimly and pointed toward the building 3 blocks away, where a makeshift flag hung from the roof. "Riverside Medical Center. Someone's waiting for us." For the first time since the world ended, Marcus Webb wasn't alone. 3 blocks might as well have been 3 miles. Marcus and Ashley crouched behind an overturned delivery truck, surveying the nightmare landscape between them and Riverside Medical Center. The street was thick with infected, at least 40 of them visible from their position, wandering in that characteristic aimless pattern that Marcus had been studying. Ashley checked a small revolver she'd pulled from her jacket, her hands steadier now than they'd been in the tunnels. "I've got 6 shots, she whispered. "You?" Marcus showed her his pistol. 9. "Not nearly enough." She nodded toward a group of infected clustered near an abandoned police car. "I noticed something while I was hiding these past few days. They respond to car alarms, sirens, anything loud and mechanical. They swarm toward it like moths to flame." Marcus felt a spark of recognition, the tactical part of his brain engaging. A distraction. "We set off an alarm away from our route, draw them off, then move fast while they're concentrated elsewhere." Ashley's eyes lit up with understanding. "There's a pawn shop 2 blocks east. It had an old security system, the loud kind. If we could activate it." It was risky, but risk had become their currency in this new world. They moved carefully through the shadows, using abandoned cars and doorways as cover, their movements synchronized without needing words. Marcus found himself grateful for Ashley's presence. She moved like someone who understood urban survival, quick and aware. The pawn shop's windows were already shattered, its contents long since looted. Inside, Ashley made her way to the back office while Marcus kept watch. The infected outside continued their wandering pattern, oblivious to the two humans barely 30 feet away. Every second felt stretched, distorted by adrenaline and fear. "Got it?" Ashley's whisper carried from the office, and then the world exploded into sound. The alarm shrieked into the morning air, a piercing wail that seemed impossibly loud. The effect on the infected was immediate and terrifying. Every head snapped toward the sound in perfect unison, and then they moved, converging on the pawn shop with frightening purpose. Marcus and Ashley burst from the back exit as the first infected crashed through the front, their moans nearly drowning out the alarm. They ran west, back toward Riverside as the horde flooded east toward the sound. The path ahead was clearer now, only scattered infected remaining, disoriented by the competing stimuli of the alarm and the fleeing humans. They were within sight of Riverside's northwest entrance when Marcus saw movement on the hospital roof. A figure with binoculars, then frantic hand signals. A woman's voice called down, sharp and commanding, "Incoming from your 6. Move left now." Marcus didn't question it. He grabbed Ashley's arm and pulled her left into the recessed entrance of a pharmacy, just as a massive infected man, easily 6.5 feet tall and grotesquely muscular, barreled past where they'd been standing. The thing moved faster than any infected Marcus had seen, with a coordination that defied everything he'd learned about their limitations. "Variant," the voice from the roof shouted. "Don't let it corner you." The creature spun toward them and Marcus saw its face, fresher than the others, less decayed, with eyes that held a terrifying spark of something almost like awareness. Ashley fired twice, both shots hitting center mass, but it barely slowed. The variant charged, and Marcus swung his bat with everything he had, connecting with its jaw in a crack of bone and rotten flesh. It staggered but didn't fall. From the hospital entrance, 3 people emerged, armed with makeshift spears and moving in coordinated formation. They drove the variant back with precise strikes, exploiting its aggression, making it overextend. One of them, a tall man with military bearing, drove his spear through the creature's eye socket, finally dropping it. "Inside now," he commanded. "That alarm's going to draw every infected in 5 blocks." They ran for the hospital entrance as a group, the 3 defenders covering their retreat. The moment Marcus and Ashley crossed the threshold, heavy doors slammed shut behind them, and multiple locks engaged with solid, reassuring clicks. Inside, emergency lighting gave the lobby a dim, amber glow. A woman in her 30s with dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail stepped forward, a radio clipped to her belt. Her eyes were intelligent, calculating, taking in every detail of the new arrivals. "I'm Elena Rodriguez," she said, extending her hand. "Welcome to Riverside. I hope you're ready to fight because sanctuary here comes with a price." Marcus shook her hand, feeling the strength in her grip, seeing the determination in her eyes. Behind her, he could see more people, at least 20, all armed, all watching with the wary hope of survivors who'd learned that every newcomer could be either salvation or doom. "We're ready," Marcus said, and meant it. The war was just beginning. Elena led Marcus and Ashley through the hospital corridors, which had been transformed into something resembling a military compound. Barricades constructed from hospital beds and filing cabinets blocked every ground floor window, and someone had spray-painted directional markers on the walls in bright orange. The emergency lighting cast everything in an amber glow that was both eerie and oddly comforting. As they walked, Elena explained the situation with the brisk efficiency of a natural leader. "We have 23 people here, including you 2. Mostly hospital staff, a few patients who were here when everything collapsed, and survivors who made it to us like you did. We've got the 3rd and 4th floors secured, the stairwells barricaded at strategic points. The roof is our lookout post and emergency extraction point, though there's nowhere to extract to anymore." Marcus noticed the people they passed: a middle-aged man in surgical scrubs organizing medical supplies, a teenage boy sharpening makeshift spears, an elderly woman tending to a small garden of potted plants beneath a skylight. Everyone had a purpose, a task. There was order here, structure, and that alone was worth more than gold. They entered what had once been a conference room, now converted into a command center. Maps covered the walls, marked with red X's, blue circles and green squares. A tall African-American man with close-cropped gray hair and the unmistakable bearing of career military stood studying them. Elena gestured toward him. "This is Colonel James Peterson, retired Army." He's been coordinating our defense strategy. Peterson turned, his sharp eyes assessing the newcomers in seconds. Marcus Webb, National Guard Communications. Marcus introduced himself, recognizing a superior officer when he saw one. Ashley Morrison, civilian, but I learn fast. Peterson's expression softened slightly. Good. We need both military expertise and adaptable civilians. Elena, they need to hear the reality. Elena nodded and pointed to the map. Here's the situation. We estimate there are approximately 15,000 infected in the city. They're not mindless, not completely. They're evolving, adapting. That variant you encountered outside? We've identified at least 6 of them operating in this sector. They're faster, stronger, and they seem to direct the others like pack leaders. Ashley's face went pale. You're saying they're organizing? Colonel Peterson crossed his arms. We've observed patterns. Coordinated movements, strategic positioning around resources. 3 days ago they laid what we can only describe as an ambush for a supply run. They're learning, which means we need to learn faster. Marcus felt his stomach tighten, but his tactical training kicked in. What's our supply situation? Elena pulled out a notebook filled with precise inventory lists. We've got the hospital pharmacy, which gives us medications and medical supplies for approximately 6 months if rationed. Food is our critical issue. We have maybe 3 weeks at current consumption. Water for 2 months thanks to the building's reserve tanks. We've been doing supply runs to nearby stores, but each run gets more dangerous. Peterson tapped the map at several green squares. These are potential supply caches we've identified. Supermarkets, warehouses, a National Guard depot 4 miles north. The problem is numbers and those variants. We lose people on runs and we can't afford to lose people. Marcus studied the map, his mind racing through scenarios. The infected move in patterns, tidal flows. I've been tracking it. They're less active during peak daylight hours, roughly 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. And they respond predictably to certain stimuli, loud noises, lights, movement. What if we used that? Elena leaned forward, interested. How? Marcus pointed to several locations. Coordinated distractions. We set up automated systems, timers on car alarms, radios broadcasting on loops. We create a pattern they follow, pull them away from our actual objective. We did it accidentally today with the pawn shop alarm. What if we did it intentionally, scientifically? Peterson's eyes lit with understanding. We control the battlefield. Make them respond to us instead of us reacting to them. Ashley spoke up, her voice gaining confidence. I worked in tech before this, programming and systems. If we could find the right equipment, I could set up automated triggers, time sequences. Make them think there are humans in one location while we operate in another. Elena looked between them, and for the first time since the world ended, Marcus saw something like hope in her expression. We'd need to test it, small scale first. But if it works... A sudden commotion from the hallway interrupted her. A young woman burst into the room, her face flushed. Elena. The radio. There's another transmission, military frequency. They're saying there's a safe zone being established in Pittsburgh, and they're sending reconnaissance teams to extract survivors from surrounding cities. They'll be in our area in 72 hours. The room erupted in excited chatter, but Colonel Peterson raised his hand for silence. His face was grave. 72 hours means we need to be visible, coordinated, and ready for extraction. It also means we need to survive 3 more days in a city full of infected who are getting smarter every hour. Marcus met Elena's eyes and saw his own determination reflected there. 3 days. They had 3 days to turn survival into salvation. The parking garage 3 blocks from Riverside became their proving ground. Marcus stood on the hospital roof with binoculars, watching as Ashley and a young former paramedic named Danny Kowalski worked their way through the shadows toward the structure. They carried a duffel bag filled with car batteries, portable radios, and timing devices Ashley had cobbled together from hospital equipment and salvaged electronics. The plan was simple in concept, terrifyingly complex in execution. They would set up 3 separate distraction points, each programmed to activate in sequence, creating a wave pattern that would pull infected away from the National Guard depot to the north. If it worked, a larger team could raid the depot for weapons, ammunition, and military-grade supplies. If it failed, Ashley and Danny would be trapped in a garage full of the undead. "They're in position," called out Jennifer Hayes, a former police officer who'd taken over as primary lookout. She tracked their progress through her rifle scope. Infected count in the immediate area, 12, no variants visible. Elena stood beside Marcus, radio in hand, coordinating between the roof team and the runners. Colonel Peterson was on the third floor with the reaction team, ready to deploy if things went wrong. Everything depended on timing and trust. Marcus watched Ashley work through the binoculars. Even from this distance, he could see her methodical precision as she wired the first device to a pickup truck's horn. Danny kept watch, his hand tight on a crowbar, his body language screaming tension. Minutes stretched like hours. A pair of infected wandered dangerously close to their position, but Ashley didn't pause, didn't panic. She finished the connection, gave Danny a thumbs up, and they moved to the second vehicle. "She's good under pressure," Elena observed quietly. "We're lucky you found each other." Marcus nodded, surprised by how much he'd come to trust Ashley in just hours. In the old world, they would have been strangers passing on the street. In this world, they were something more vital. They were a team. Device 1 is set. Elena's radio crackled with Danny's whispered confirmation. Moving to position 2. The second setup went smoother, faster. They were developing a rhythm, learning to work in this new reality. The third device was the critical one. Positioned on the garage's upper level, it would create a cascade effect, drawing infected upward and away from street level. Ashley climbed the garage stairs like a ghost, Danny right behind her. That's when everything went wrong. Variant. Jennifer's voice cracked with urgency. Coming from the east, moving fast toward the garage. Marcus's blood turned to ice. Through the binoculars he saw it. One of the larger variants moving with that horrible purposeful speed, heading directly toward the garage entrance. Behind it, a group of at least 20 infected followed like a grotesque parade. "Ashley, Danny, you've got incoming." Elena barked into the radio. "Variant plus 20-30 seconds out." Ashley's voice came back, strained but controlled. "Last device needs 2 more minutes. We can't run or this whole plan dies." Colonel Peterson's voice cut through on the command channel. "Reaction team is moving. Hold position." But Marcus knew the math. The reaction team would never make it in time, and if the variant got into that garage, Ashley and Danny were dead. He made his decision in a heartbeat, grabbing Jennifer's rifle. "What are you doing?" Elena demanded. Marcus was already moving toward the roof access door. "Buying them 2 minutes." He hit the street at a full sprint, emerging from Riverside's side entrance with the rifle raised. He'd qualified as a marksman in the Guard, but that had been on a controlled range, not in an apocalyptic street with lives hanging in the balance. The variant was 40 yards from the garage entrance when Marcus fired. The shot went high, missing the creature but slamming into a car window behind it. The explosion of glass achieved exactly what Marcus wanted: the variant's attention. It turned toward him with terrifying speed, its distorted face twisting with something like rage. The horde behind it shifted direction, following their leader's focus. Marcus ran, leading them away from the garage, back toward Riverside. His lungs burned, his legs pumped, and behind him came the sounds of pursuit. Elena's voice screamed through his radio, but he couldn't make out the words over the pounding of his heart. He was 20 yards from Riverside's entrance when the reaction team burst out. Colonel Peterson and 4 others, forming a defensive line with spears and improvised shields. Marcus dove past them as they engaged the variant, their coordinated strikes holding the creature back. Behind them, the heavy doors stood open, sanctuary just feet away. Devices activated. Ashley's voice burst through the radio. "It's working." From 3 different directions, car horns, alarms, and radios erupted into noise. The infected horde behind the variant hesitated, confused by multiple stimuli, then began fragmenting, groups peeling off toward each sound source. "Fall back," Peterson commanded, and the reaction team retreated in formation, pulling Marcus with them. The doors slammed shut just as the variant's fist crashed against the reinforced metal. Inside, Marcus collapsed against the wall, gasping. Elena stood over him, her face torn between fury and relief. "That was incredibly stupid and incredibly brave," she said. Marcus managed a weak smile. 2 more days until extraction. We're going to need a lot more of both." 48 hours after the successful test run, Marcus Webb stood in the pre-dawn darkness outside the National Guard depot, leading a team of 12 survivors on the most critical mission of their lives. Ashley's distraction devices were positioned throughout a 6-block radius, ready to create a symphony of chaos that would pull the infected away from their objective. The military extraction team was due in 16 hours, and Colonel Peterson had been clear: They needed weapons, ammunition, and supplies to ensure everyone at Riverside could be evacuated safely. The depot's chain-link fence was intact but unmanned, its gates locked. Beyond it, Marcus could see the armory building, dark and silent. Jennifer Hayes moved up beside him, bolt cutters ready, while Ashley monitored the tablet she'd programmed with their distraction sequence. Danny Kowalski and 8 others formed a perimeter, weapons ready, eyes scanning for threats. Infected count? Marcus whispered. Jennifer glassed the area through her scope. I count 32 visible, scattered pattern. No variants in sight, but that doesn't mean they're not close. Marcus checked his watch. 5:47 a.m. They had a 3-hour window before infected activity increased. Ashley, initiate sequence alpha. Ashley's fingers moved across the tablet screen, and within seconds the coordinated distractions began. Car alarms erupted from the south, then west, then east, each one timed precisely 15 seconds apart. The effect was mesmerizing and terrifying. The infected responded exactly as predicted, their heads turning in unison toward each new stimulus, their bodies following like puppets on strings. Within 2 minutes, the area around the depot had cleared significantly. Now, Marcus commanded. Jennifer cut the locks and the team poured through the fence toward the armory. The building's door was reinforced but not locked from the inside. They entered quickly, flashlights cutting through the darkness to reveal exactly what they'd hoped for. Racks of rifles, cases of ammunition, body armor, and military-grade supplies. We've got 10 minutes before the next wave of distractions, Ashley called out, tracking their timeline. After that, the pattern might start losing effectiveness. The team worked with practiced efficiency, loading weapons and ammunition into the bags they'd brought. Marcus found himself working beside a quiet woman named Rebecca Torres, who'd been a hospital administrator before the world ended. She moved with surprising strength, hauling ammunition cases like she'd been doing it her whole life. Everyone had adapted, evolved, become more than they'd been before. Movement. Danny's urgent whisper froze everyone. Variant, coming from the north entrance, and it's not alone. Through the armory's windows, Marcus saw the nightmare approaching. 2 variants, moving with coordinated purpose, and behind them at least 50 infected, somehow unaffected by the distractions. Colonel Peterson's voice crackled through their radios from his position at Riverside. We're tracking them on binoculars. They're learning to ignore the distractions, focusing on the actual human activity. You need to extract now. Marcus made the calculation instantly. They had enough supplies loaded to make the mission worthwhile, but they were about to be trapped. Everyone out, back in trance, move in formation. The team emerged into the pale dawn light just as the variants reached the front of the building. They ran in a tight group, the stronger members helping those carrying the heaviest loads. Behind them, the infected poured through the depot gates in a grotesque flood. Ashley was breathing hard, struggling with a heavy ammunition case. Marcus grabbed one handle and together they ran. Jennifer provided covering fire, her shots precise and deliberate, dropping infected that got too close. But there were too many and they were gaining ground. Then from the east, engines roared to life. 3 military Humvees burst around the corner, mounted guns opening fire with devastating efficiency. The infected horde fragmented under the assault, and a voice boomed through a loudspeaker. Survivors, get to the vehicles. We're your extraction team ahead of schedule. The next few minutes were chaos and salvation intertwined. The military team created a defensive perimeter, their professional efficiency a beautiful contrast to the desperate survival tactics the Riverside group had been using. Marcus and his team reached the Humvees, loading their precious cargo while soldiers covered their retreat. More survivors at Riverside Medical Center. Marcus shouted to the team leader, a hard-faced captain named Victoria Cross. 23 people, defendable position, 3 blocks south. Captain Cross nodded sharply. We'll get everyone. That's why we're here. As the convoy moved toward Riverside, Marcus looked back at the infected horde, still pursuing but falling behind. He thought about the journey from that fire station basement, about Elena's brave radio broadcast, about Ashley's quick thinking and Colonel Peterson's leadership. They'd survived not through luck, but through resilience, strategy, and the fundamental human ability to adapt and overcome. The war against the undead wasn't over. But humanity had learned to fight back, and that made all the difference.